Okay, well, welcome today. We're going to go ahead and get started, especially because we've got like a limited amount of time, and then we'll do snack at the end as we're breaking and that kind of thing. So, if you're starving to death or something, there's food back there, but we'll get it all out and serve it later for the group. So it's great to have you here. This is not our normal meeting place. We just couldn't get a room today. And so we have this room reserved for the paint and sip a little bit later. And so we figured out the class was ending at 4:50 in here. So we're like, okay, well, let's just kind of get here. We can get an hour to touch base. It's great to have, I know we have all of our Corpus here, and then we also have a number of other kind of key returners in our ministry who we see as leaders, and that's kind of something that we wanted to do this year, is kind of rope more people into our teaching times. So what these meetings will normally look like is that I'll spend a good amount of time doing some Bible teaching, and I'm going to try and do two different things this year. A little bit differently as we were reflecting on last year. I am going to try and do more of an ongoing exegetical study where we'll look through a book of the Bible and learn about it. But I also want to spend some time breaking down some more topical things, but thinking biblically about specific parts of our ministry. We did this at the very end of last year for those of you who were there, and we talked some about sermons and about worship, and we got a lot of positive feedback of people. It's like, oh yeah, I've never really thought about why we preach or what the Bible has to say about preaching and those kinds of things. So and then we'll have announcements and different things. We're also going to be trying this year, I don't know why it took us till 2025, but we're going to record these meetings. And that way, if people miss for whatever reason, we'll have a recording. And I know every semester, there's just the nature of the beast. Some Corfas can't be at the meetings or can't be at the whole meeting. And so we'll have some sort of a way for you to make that up. That's not just like, I hope my Corfa took good notes and remembers to tell me what's going on. So today I'm gonna start us off, and then I think Peter's going to talk just some specific things about the Grove on Friday night. Court and Sienna are going to talk about just how we're handling all those core cards that we're getting, and just making sure that we're kind of coordinated. Because the big deal with those is that there's no system. There's no like auto text that, welcomes them and gets them involved in a core. Our whole philosophy of a ministry is one-on-one is how it's done. And so it really depends on you guys calling those people or texting or reaching out in whatever way and trying to make sure they are invited to a course. Some of them will respond. Why do you sign up and then not respond? Sometimes they sign up and won't respond 2 minutes later. I don't know, they had a change of heart. But we want to be faithful on our end, because a lot of them do respond, and a lot of them are looking for somewhere to plug in, and we just want to make sure they get an invite. And even if you invite them and they can't come to your thing, you sort of become their connection to make sure that they have somewhere to plug in. It's not like, oh, all right, I'm done. Hope someone else calls them. It's like, make sure that handoff happens. But Court and Sienna will go over the practicals of that, and then we'll wrap up with some time praying. So what I want to talk about tonight, I'm actually going to give you an assignment to start. I want you to work in groups of 2, max 3. So very small groups. And I want to talk tonight about just the whole idea of Christian assemblies. Why do Christians get together? So I want you to do some research. I'm going to give you, 5-8 minutes. Here's your questions. Looking in the Bible, why did the early church meet? Or another way of saying that, what did they do when they got together? That could give us some clues as to why they met. So I want you to think you've got especially Acts. Acts is going to be a major part of this. And then also you've got the letters have glimpses of some of that. The different letters that are written refer to different things or refer to their meetings. You can Google, you can chat GPT, you can do whatever you want, but I don't want you regurgitating something from Google or chat GPT. I want you to go look at those scriptures so that it's like, oh yes, I see this. That makes sense. Because sometimes you read things, you're like, I don't get that same thing from that. So again, 2s or max 3, depending on what it is. I want you to work together, research, and then come back ready to share with me here in 5-8 minutes. Go. Time, hopefully across all of us, we've done some great research. So I know no one's had time to do super thorough. But what'd you find? What are things, reasons that you think, or things that you see the early church doing when they met together? I'm gonna, even though this whiteboard's really far away, I am gonna write it because otherwise I'll forget what all you say. So it'll be the best we do. Be bold, be bold. Yep.
Public reading scripture.
Okay, yeah, public reading. Where did you see that? This is not a good marker.
Hebrews 10.
Okay, yeah. And this is one that shows up actually, quite a bit. You see it in certain places, even like in Acts 4 when Peter gets his escapes from prison, they pray, but a part of what they do is just reciting a psalm together. That's kind of their prayer. And then Paul tells Timothy to devote himself to the public reading of scripture. You see in Revelation this idea of, blessed are the ones who read aloud these words. Blessed are those who hear them. So it kind of threads through. It seems clear that when they were getting together, they were reading scripture. So great one. Who else? Yep, Jeremiah?
Breaking of bread.
Breaking of bread. What do you think that means?
Like you.
Okay. It's an interesting one because we get this, I don't have a good pen, but bread, sometimes bread has an A. And so you get this idea of breaking of bread. I assume was that Acts 2? Yeah, Acts 2, that they're doing that. Yeah, bring it up to me if you've got a good one. So some people think that it's just, they were eating together. And some people think that that's talking about they were celebrating the Lord's Supper together. And then there's a whole other group of people that are like, yeah, but the Lord's Supper seems to have always been a part of a meal. So maybe they were always doing both. That anytime they were together, because again, the Lord's Supper was initiated at the end of this meal. So, but they're definitely breaking bread. They're definitely sometimes having the Lord's Supper. Yeah.
Continuation on that's in Acts 2, 42 through 47. They also talk about how they basically devoted themselves to the mission sacrifice in those verses, and it says they not only broke bread, but they also gathered together in the temple, and then just kind of spent time with God.
So gathered, and what were all the things? We'll talk about this in the temple is an interesting one because we do see them in different places. And I'll ask that in a second. Where else do we see them gathering? But what else did it say they did?
They also sold their possessions and property.
Okay, so there's some sort of a selling stuff and giving. Yeah. Anyone else remember what else it says? Yeah.
Oh, for that?
Yeah, let's finish out Acts 2 since we're there. Anyone else look at that one? Prayer, yeah. And so in that case, Acts 2 is an interesting one because it's sort of summarizing a lot of meetings, right? We have certain times where it's a meeting that they had. Sometimes it's summarizing because how often does Acts 2 say they were meeting? Every day. So we have to kind of do some guesswork here. Was this mean that they had like church every day, or was this kind of like, okay, we're going to the temple, like new things are happening, and when I've got free time, I'm going up there to see who's there and what they're teaching and what's happening, that kind of thing. Yeah, Caitlin?
I also like that at the end it says that they were praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people.
Uh-huh.
So you're just like enjoying staying with one another.
Uh-huh. Praising God, there's this enjoyment thing. Okay. What else do we have? Shri, you were about to say something earlier, and I stopped.
I have something from Acts 4:32-35.
Uh-huh.
One heart and mind fellowship.
Okay.
There is sharing of possessions to make sure that no one knows who needs it.
Yeah. This one heart and mind is an interesting thing. It shows up again. Did anyone find it in any of the letters as you were going through? Yeah.
Ephesians, he talks about it.
In Ephesians, it talks about it. So we've got this idea that there's something here that's like unifying that about these meetings. We get on the same page. We don't just think the same things, we love the same things. And there's, something growing out of that. Jude?
Felipe and I were talking about how people are called to be like all one body, we're in the body, and going to meet together to fulfill the function God designed us.
Yeah.
And it's also to fulfill the one another commands, which we can always do, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, we can assume there's all these one another commands, and we can definitely assume that some of those or a lot of those are happening when they gather together, but often that's not really spelled out. It's just sort of given. I wrote a letter to this church and told you to do these things to one another. When and where and exactly how. It's probably in and out of those assemblies. Yeah, Madeline?
Romans 12:3-8 talks about using our spiritual gifts to serve one another.
Yeah, so they're using their gifts. Anyone else find that idea somewhere else? Yeah, Jabez?
In 14:22, it's like you're using gifts not only for edification of people,
Yeah.
it's proof for non-believers when they come in and see. So
So 1 Corinthians 12-14 and Romans 12 both have this same idea. They both reference this idea of us being a body. They kind of have different goals. 1 Corinthians 14 seems to be more about how much they're using their gifts to try to look more important than other people. And Paul's kind of correcting. But he says, when you come together, one of you has a tongue, one of you has a word of prophecy, one of you, there was almost this sense, and some Christian groups have taken that very seriously to say we shouldn't plan like a liturgy or a plan, that what we should do is get together and we just kind of wait and say like, all right, who has a gift from the Spirit? And so the Quakers and different groups like that. And obviously it's biblical. I think it's dangerous because I'm like, oh, let's pick the most dysfunctional church in the New Testament and try and act like them, because Paul doesn't really comment and say like, he's not really describing their service, but there does seem to be something very unplanned about their service. And Paul doesn't seem to have a problem with that. He just says you got to do it in an orderly way. So yeah, Isaac?
I'm not sure how much this has to do with the practice of the church, but in Micah 4:5-8, it mentions gathering the lame and the outcast. And if that has to do with the same gathering as the gathering of the church, then maybe there's some charity happening there.
Yeah. Well, and we do see some of that. I mean, obviously that's you're dipping back into the Old Testament, but the early church sees themselves as a people of the Scripture, and they don't have what we call the New Testament. They have the Old Testament, what they call the Scriptures, and then they have what in Acts 2, it says they devoted themselves to what? What was the very first thing? You remember? The apostles' teaching. So the apostles' teaching is sort of the New Testament in infant form, right? Because this is what's going to grow out of that. That's a good one. Lucas?
The very, very end of Acts 2 says, and the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved.
Mm-hmm.
There's a purpose to expand.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of pulls back to even what Jabez was saying, that there is a sense, especially in that 1 Corinthians 14, that you need to be thinking about, like, there are going to be non-Christians coming in and out. Maybe they're not there every time, but you have to plan in such a way that this would be edifying to them and not destructive to them. So there is some sense, and it seems like from what we can tell from early church history, that there was an openness to their meetings, but that often the communion service itself was exclusive. So the non-Christians would be sort of dismissed, and then they would take communion or have this meal together there. What else are we missing? Anything? Yeah.
We gather to build each other up.
Yeah, so there's an encouraging, a building each other up. Where do you see that?
Ephesians 4, 12.
Okay. Someone else out there? Yeah, Peter.
Worship in song.
Yeah, where do you see that?
Colossians 3 and also Ephesians 5.
Uh-huh. And you're probably starting to see that we can find sort of all of the things that we do in our modern services. We can sort of, prayer and this and that. It's hard to find them all in one place, and it's hard to find them always specifically about the assembly. Which we tend to this is something people have talked a lot about in American Christianity, right? Is it's like, it's not just about what you do on Sunday morning, it's about the whole time. And so, worshiping and singing, is that something that's only confined to this one special room we get, or is that something that flows throughout the week? And, and we can do more, but it's like Peter and I, when we hang out, we're not like, let's sing a hymn together, but maybe we should be more like that. That's a gathering of the saints. Yeah, Diego.
Yeah, Matthew 18, verse 15 through 20 talks about accountability.
Okay. So this is an interesting one, because Jesus is sort of preempting all of this, and he's talking about accountability within the church. And I think there's, accountability. I don't know. I think there's some interesting things there, because the word he's using there about gathering, I think in our modern world, it reads a little weird. It's like, okay, Juke sins against me, and so I'm going to go and talk to him. And then the next time I'm going to take Emiliano if it doesn't go well. And then if that doesn't go well, he says, take it to the church. And I'm like, some of us go to churches that have like 10,000 people. And that seems like a major ramp up, like 1 to 10,000, And, but again, Jesus is sort of, in one sense, he's saying these words long before they have any concept of church. The word he's using, ecclesia, is the same. It just means sort of the gathering or the assembly. The Romans used it to describe their senate. It wasn't a religious word. The Greek copy of the Old Testament used it whenever Israel would gather. They would be the ecclesia. It could be big or little. It just kind of maybe means, when Jesus is saying that, like to the group, who's involved, who sees this. Or we also have, but Matthew's writing this 30, 40 years later, and there is a church by them. So trying to think, okay, what is Jesus's expectation? But there is some sense that, and I would say if you go in, especially 1 Timothy, there's this sense that elders who sin must be rebuked publicly, so that there is certain people who they're rebuking. The higher up you are, the more you take on a leadership role, the more public your sin is, and thus the more public your rebuking and repentance has to be. Seems to be the logic there. So it is a part of it, not one that we tend to participate in much today, but yeah. Okay, so one more. Unity, and what do you mean by that? Yeah, that they're meeting, that's their goal or their purpose. Is how do we unify? Yeah, Janice. Yeah, so there's kind of this keeping watch of what's going on, for sure. And it does seem like, one we haven't talked about, because it doesn't really come up in the rest of the New Testament, but in John, and it does seem people were doing this early on, there was this washing each other's feet thing that Jesus is like, this was the assembly, this is what they do. And you see that in certain places still. On Maundy Thursday, the Pope traditionally washes 12 people's feet. And they, it's just this kind of reminder. And some of you may have done that in core or seen that done in different places. So here's my question, is how clear of a picture did you find for what Christian assemblies should look like? What do you think? How clear is the picture, Jason?
I feel like it was clear as far as like general things we should be doing as we gather. But there isn't really like a specific we should do this and then this and then do this. These things like we're doing it wrong, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's good. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I feel like it's not very clear when I read these words, and it's like, okay, worship. That's great. We all have a concept of that, but our concept of what it could be like 100 different things. Like, even like prayer, are we by ourselves? Are we praying out loud? Are we all praying individually but out loud? There's just so many different versions.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a couple different places where Paul, in writing to these churches, references sort of the traditions of the church or the customs, or if you want to be contentious about this, we don't have any other practice, nor do any of the churches of God. And so there's kind of these, so we didn't even talk about women needing to, wear head coverings in the assembly. Get some good 1 Corinthians 11 in there. We've got these things where it's like, okay, what do I do with that? So it seems like he's pointing to this thing of like, yeah, church kind of looks pretty similar. That's one way of reading what he's saying across all these places. But I think then the question is, if they really intended for that to be across all times as well, they didn't do a good job of recording for us what that was. What did those meetings look like? We don't have much record of that. We have some assumptions in certain of our Christian traditions. There's this, it's like we're doing the same thing the apostles were doing in the first century. And that would be great, except the Catholics, the Eastern Orthodox, and different Protestant groups all claim the exact same thing. And the evidence is scant. And so we're trying to maybe we're still doing it, but we really don't have a lot of records of what those things looked like exactly. There are some other writings, some extra biblical writings that give some insight, but it's just a little bit unclear. Here's my next question. What questions would you want answered that you couldn't find answered? Is there anything you think like this should be explained, but it wasn't there? And I know you only had a few minutes to start looking, but say it one more time. Yeah, qualifications for a pastor. Pastor's an interesting one because it's only mentioned one time in the New Testament as like a church title. The only other time, it's the same word for shepherd. So it gets brought up a lot in the Gospels, but usually like in a parable, like you're just talking about a shepherd. And so one time in Ephesians, we get our favorite title for church leaders, and there's no qualification list there. So yeah, sometimes we're like, okay, what is this? And what were they doing? Like we get hints that they were being supported by the church sometimes, but not always. But it's a little bit unclear. That's a good one. What else? What would you want to know that you can't find?
How does the leadership work in assembly?
Yeah. How? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are books upon books upon books written about elders and deacons, but all we really have is 2 lists of qualifications that don't match each other, and no list of what they did. We get one reference that elders who teach are worthy of double honor, which gives us an insight that some elders were teaching, but apparently not all of them. So what were those other people doing? I don't know. It's like there's a lot of this kind of stuff. Anyone else? Yeah, Isaac?
If a church officiates a wedding, like what has to happen for that to be valid?
Yeah, we don't get any real like weddings, funerals, these things that these are like sacraments. Like we go to church to do this, but the Bible doesn't really explain. I mean, the closest thing we get to like a description of a wedding in the New Testament is Jesus making a lot of wine. And that's not typically what we do at our weddings, but we don't really get any vows or, so we do like historical studies of Judaism at the time and try to glean what was going on. But yeah, that's a great one. Did you have your hand up?
I was just gonna say like church size,
yeah.
I don't think mega churches are bad, but it's different experiences. So
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to this. I meant to come back to this. Where else did you see besides the temple that they were meeting? In homes. Where'd you see that?
In my mind's eye.
In your mind's eye. It comes out in different ways. We certainly see things like I mentioned the Peter thing where they get together and pray, but that was at someone's home, right? There in Acts 4. We see that in some of Paul's letters where he'll greet, I want to send my greetings to Aquila and Priscilla and the church that meets in their home. And so they have these different, homes. We don't really have a sense of were these poor people that lived in Roman tenements? In like small apartments, where these rich people that lived in villas, and so they could host a lot of people. We just kind of know that some homes had churches. Where else do we see them meeting? Yeah. We're guessing. Do you remember a specific example? Yes. So, and where was he right before that? In the synagogues. So we see them often preaching in synagogues. So it seems like at least in Paul's missionary journeys, he would start in these Jewish places of worship, but then they'd often get kicked out. And then at least there in Acts 19, they go to this like lecture hall kind of place that's apparently across the street from the synagogue. So again, we don't get like a super consistent picture, but what were they doing? Did what they did in the homes and what they did in this hall, was this just a bigger version of that? Or was it like, well, Paul's lecturing here and what we do in the home is totally different? We don't really know a lot of this. And this is one of the questions that I find helpful when I try to study the New Testament, is sort of, what is it that I would expect to be there that isn't? What am I, and often we're so fixated on what's there that we don't notice what's kind of not there. But I think can be profound. Not that maybe God doesn't want me to know, but obviously he doesn't want us to know real bad. There are things that we get told over and over and over and over in the New Testament, and then there are things that just don't get addressed at all. And I think we have to pay attention to that. Do you see in this, as you were doing your research, a clear distinction between like church and other kinds of meetings? Yeah. Really, they don't get named a lot, right? What are you thinking, Seth? Maybe. We don't, we do see Paul speaking in certain circumstances, but they wouldn't necessarily, would they consider that a meeting of the church? One time multiple times he's on trial and he speaks and preaches and that kind of stuff. So we got these, but we don't really find that the church is not usually a description of the meeting as much as it is of the group, the church that meets in their home, right? And so when people gather, that's church, maybe. Anyone else have any insights on that? Different kinds of meetings, names?
Like setting up a guide to help give the widows who are Greek who can't speak Hebrew, to like make sure they're getting food, and also like reference to like a widow's some sort of organization which is providing for them external to the church.
Yeah.
Inside the church, of course, in Timothy 5, I would point to like there's one. I don't think they're like, oh, we're handing out food, this is church, but like it's obviously the church that is doing this, and it's like instructions to Timothy on how to do this as apostolic delegate in Ephesus at the time. Yeah. So he's talking about in Acts 6, where we have these men appointed to handle taking care that the Grecian widows weren't getting fed as much. And, widows are very vulnerable people in this culture, and that they're not getting fed as well as the Hebrew-speaking widows. So they appoint these leaders, and so you've got some sort of gatherings where it's like we're just sort of just taking care of the poor among us. We already touched on that a little bit. But I think it's interesting because we tend to have these categories that we work from of church and parachurch. Or this is church, but this is just ministry. Or this is,
in the New Testament, we're sort of glossing all of that on top. The New Testament doesn't really engage with that. It doesn't use those words in the same way. And I think that we just have to take that seriously to some degree of like, okay, let's sometimes churches major in the minors. We pick something weird. I mean, churches split over this literal, like they'll split over whether a church building can have a kitchen in it. Whether it's the architecture of church buildings. Did you find anything about the architecture of church buildings in God's word? But we're majoring in the minors sometimes. It's like, okay, have it or don't. But it seems like we could glean from the things they're doing some of the purposes of these meetings, and maybe we have some flex on how we reach those purposes. So I'm running out of time. So last thing I want to say is, what do you think we can glean for our meetings? What are the lessons or any insights that you think we can glean as we meet as some expression of the larger church on campus? Yeah.
Maybe you don't need every single meeting to address everything on that board.
Yeah.
But each meeting or assembly you have should at least address one of those things.
Okay. Yeah, we should be hitting some of these same notes. And that's a thing, even at church, is like, church is when we do all of these. But if we just pray, that's not church, that's a prayer meeting. I don't think they thought in terms of that. It's like the church gathered, and it gathered to pray. And often it was need-based, what was going on at the moment. Yeah. Who else? Yeah, dude.
I think part of this means there's a little more weight on what we're doing, because if the church is a lot less clear than more just this group of people meeting in houses originally, a lot of us are meeting with groups of Christians in houses.
Yeah.
God puts a lot of commands on like how leaders of churches should act.
Yeah.
So that kind of applies to us equally.
Yeah.
So we're leading.
Yeah, it gives a weight. We don't get off the hook of like, what we're doing is unimportant because there's this other thing that's official. And again, I do think the church very quickly started organizing. I'm not saying it didn't. It had to. I mean, it's, if we all met up one day and we were meeting for the first time, but we had to be a club together, we would figure out some sort of organization or we would disband. That doesn't work. And so humans quickly organize. There's some silly arguments I've read about like the first century church not having any organization, and like, oh, 1st and 2nd Timothy, they must be from the 2nd century because there's organization. I'm like, you think it took these people 100 years to have leaders? I'm like, it takes like students that don't know much of anything about 3 weeks to figure out they need officers, in their club, that someone's got to call these meetings. And they're like, yeah, easy 100 years before they figure it out. I'm like, these are not stupid people. I'm like, you're stupid for thinking they're stupid. But yeah. What else can we glean, Paul?
I don't know if this is right, and you can add to it or take away as you want. But just even as I've been inviting people this week to core, maybe the growth, and then seeing the flexibility here that Paul seems to describe and what he's talking about, I think I take from it some flexibility in what I'm describing based on kind of who I'm talking to. Like, am I inviting you to a Bible study or a hangout with friends who are going to read the Bible?
Yeah.
And just I think the language matters, and we see Paul using all different kinds of language to encompass, like, this is our ecclesia, this is what we do.
Yeah, language can help or it can get in the way in all sorts of situations. You figure that out real fast when you get a significant other, and it's just, are we using words the same way? And sometimes I'm like, no, I'm using the right word. But if communication isn't happening, I'm not using the right word. And I think you see that some of the things that we take these strong stands on, we're not getting that from the New Testament. We're getting it from somewhere else. Doesn't make it bad. But I think what I want us to hear is, just as we try to figure out meetings, as your church that your local congregation, multi-generational congregation that you're a part of is trying to figure out, what do we do in this meetings? We are definitely riffing. Even if the riffing happened 1,500 years ago and you've been doing the same thing since, you're still riffing. Like there's just a lot of uncertainty in this world of like, what exactly does this look like? But by saying we're riffing, it doesn't mean we're flying blind. We're not flying blind in this. We have a lot of insight into what this is supposed to be. Why were they meeting? We do have centuries of tradition to draw on. We have the scriptures to draw on. And then we also have all of these sort of cultural forms that we draw on. And those are just sort of, they're neutral, but that means they can be positive or negative. What I mean by that is things like, we have concerts. Most of us have been to a concert, and then we get here and we sing, and it can feel a lot like a concert. Well, it can make sense of the meeting to us in some ways. We sort of know norms and how to behave, but it can also get us off kilter. And we've seen how that has happened as we get some really impressive musicians up in front, and maybe our focus shifts, from God to them, or from God to my experience. Lectures. Paul, it seems like, was speaking, but we really get no real description of what was this like. Was he doing this where people were talking? Was he giving formal speeches? We just kind of know he said some stuff. And those speeches, you read in Luke or something, or Acts where Luke is writing, and he tells about sermons, and they feel long when you read them, right? They feel kind of long. It's like, oh, that's kind of long. And it took you like 1 minute to read. Do you think they got together? Paul spoke for 1 minute, and then they all just went home. I'm like, no, he's summarizing. 99% likely he's summarizing and not giving us a word for word. The same with things like the Sermon on the Mount. So we have lectures, we have other clubs. We do function in some ways like other clubs. We have our own experiences of church, and we bring a lot of those in here. We're meeting in a classroom often. You guys, a lot of us, we've come into this same room for a different purpose, but we still come in and we feel a certain way. We sit in a certain format. We do all of those things. We can't really do church like a house church in here, because we don't have a house to do it in. And so there's a lot that we're working with and from. When I think about the Grove, and then I'm going to turn it over to Peter as he starts coming up, we've said that we have 3 purposes, and we tried to make those broad for us, so that we have goals in mind more than practices in mind. The first, that we want to root deep in Scripture, and we are trying to do that. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with different ones of you of like, yes, what is the best way to do that? What is the best way to address the incredible biblical illiteracy that we're facing right now? Is that to try to get broad teaching, but we only have like 33 talks in the entire year, and they're like 30 minutes long. It's like, okay, so we're going to cover the whole Bible. Is that to do really, dig in? We're going to take Romans, and we're only going to get through chapter 4 because we're going verse by verse in the whole, and by the time you're a senior, if you happen to be a freshman at the right year, you'll learn one book of the Bible. It's like, those are both great things. They're great things. And, or we're dealing with topics that sometimes topics the Bible addresses directly, and sometimes topics that the Bible does not address directly. And we're like, okay, how do I think biblically about dating? How do I think biblically about, AI or whatever we're facing, and how to use it in my education? Those are hard things, but we are going to try and root deep in Scripture, and we're not trying to dumb it down. I think we do see a need for more training in exegesis and just, really digging into passages. And that's one of our goals for this semester. Number 2, that we're branching out to others, because so many of these things we can't do alone. And we really can't be church alone. We can be Christians alone, but we really can't be a church alone or a part of the church in that sense. And so it isn't just about me. And a part of that refining is that it's not just about what I need when we come together. It's also about what I bring. That's all this gifting language. Because what's interesting about Paul is that there are these things that he calls spiritual gifts, and some of them seem miraculous in the sense that it's like, I didn't have that until I was a Christian. And some of them seem very mundane, in the exact mixed into the same lists. That Paul sees all of these good gifts as coming from God, and we use them to serve. And then ultimately the goal is bearing fruit of a transformed life. But a part of how we bear fruit is with one another. We get to practice those things. We get to come and serve and love on each other. And as leaders, we depend on you when we come together. We depend on you for your example to the others. And that example starts the moment you walk in that door, until you walk out that door. Who are you? How are you treating the people around you? It's certainly a part of when we're together. I don't think that means we all need to look the same. I don't even think it means we all need to participate the same. I remember hearing about a church that Rick Watts told this story, a church in Australia that he went to, where because their church was a bunch of different economic groups, that their 5 elders made a very conscious decision. They would coordinate what they wore every Sunday. And he's like, one of them would wear shorts and a t-shirt. One of them would wear a full suit. One would come business casual. One would come in jeans and a nice shirt. They're like, we want anyone that walks, and I think one would come in workman kind of stuff. Like, we want anyone that comes in our church to see a leader that they could connect with. And so I think there is a place. It can be tempting to say, like, oh, we all come in here on Friday night, we should all be jumping. No, what are those people doing standing in the back? Well, we need some people that stand in the back, because not every new person that comes in is going to want to jump, right? But it's just as easy to stand in the back and judge the people that are jumping. It's not about that. We need to be doing a lot of different things, but we need to be doing them not to try and vindicate ourselves or make us look good, but to serve others and to love God and to honor him in those different ways. So we need your participation, and we need you to be a fan and not a critic. We don't need 300 critics in here that's not who Jesus is. He's our biggest fan. He's like, I'm gonna deal with all of the things you did wrong so that we can focus on you looking like me. And I think that's what we want to do for each other. We want it to be that kind of place, that when we come together, I want people who see the Jesus in me, not the people who see the devil in me. I see plenty of that, but that's not why I come together. Maybe the word will convict me. Maybe the Holy Spirit will convict me, but I don't need you to not like me so I can be convicted, right? And you don't need that from me. So we come together and we believe, we're optimistic, not because we're like hopeless optimists, but because we have faith in God. We know how all this stuff ends. So he's working it all together. Okay. I used too much time, but I don't think we have to end quite at 6. You can leave if you need to. Peter, I'm going to give it over to you.
I got one. All right, I'm going to go pretty fast, but hey, we are over halfway through the weeks of welcome. Give yourselves a round of applause. I feel like I've seen all of you at something, Corpus and non-Corpus, so that's amazing. I mean, I estimate we have met probably at least half of the freshman class at UTD at our stuff. So it's pretty awesome. You guys are awesome. We do have this final week culminating in the Grove on Friday. We've still got events every night. We got paint and sip tonight. We've got other stuff throughout the week. I'm not going to go over it. You can go to utdfocus.org and you can look at the schedule yourself. We do have these ethnic events coming up as well, right? And I just wanted to recast a vision on that. Is just like God met us where we're at, we want to meet people where they're at, right? And I think a lot of this culture stuff, people are more comfortable around people who are like them. They're more willing to bring that part of them out into the open when they're around people who understand that. And then that's when the Spirit can really work on those things through us, right? It's not about celebrating a culture and saying that's amazing. It's about bringing our culture into Jesus's lordship. So that's why we do these ethnic events. If you know anybody who are those ethnicities, be sure to invite them. Invite everyone to, we've also still got events on those nights that are open to everyone. And so Invite everybody you've met. Don't say people's no's for them. If you don't know someone's ethnicity, feel free to ask them. Or even just say, hey, I don't know if you'd be interested, but I think you might want to go to this. And they might say, hey, actually, I'm not that. And then you learned. It's not that big of a deal, actually. I've definitely been miscultured by my own people at times. And it's just funny. So yeah, invite everybody to everything. You guys are doing a rockin' job. But yeah, so finally on Friday, we've got the Grove, our very first one this year. It's gonna be so exciting. And especially for this first one, there's gonna be a lot of new people, a lot of people that you've invited, a lot of people who this is the first thing they're coming to. And oftentimes that means they're coming early because they don't know where it is. They're misjudging how long it's gonna take to get there. They don't wanna be showing up late. And so we've asked our Corfas to commit to coming 15 minutes early every week, right? So definitely at least 15 minutes early. For this first one, consider, if your schedule allows, coming 30 minutes early, right? Even if there's not a ton of new people to meet, I think it's different when a new person walks in and there's already like a party going, rather than I'm walking in and there's like 10 people and I don't know what to do. So yeah, so come early, meet people, right? You've probably got a lot of people coming. Let's just make sure people feel welcome and invited to our first Grove. And then for our Corfas, Saturday, we've got mission launch. All right, so that's where we're really gonna get into that. What?
The paper schedule says it's at 12, it's at 1.
Oh.
1 to 6. The form that you accepted it says 1 to 6, the paper says 12 to 7. Don't follow the paper, follow the calendar.
All right, 1 to 6. Mission launch, yeah, we're gonna dive into kind of the nitty gritty of core leading, give you guys those first couple core plans. And I've gotten a lot of these questions this week. Do I start core? I mean, you could probably, generally we don't, but I would recommend doing like a core, like a hangout, right? Get people together at the time of your typical core and see who can come, because it kind of is revealing of what their schedule is like, who is able to make that time for you, and just get to know each other. That'll give you a good ramp up to next week, but you don't have to. I've also not done that a lot of years, but that's something to consider. So yeah, mission launch on Saturday, but you guys are doing amazing. Again, I think best welcome week so far. You guys are bold. I have no critiques. You guys are amazing. So that's it for me.
Okay, so like Brandon said, we have a lot of people to contact right now. Sienna shared a couple days ago I don't know exactly, but something like 2025, 2026 UTD Get Connected form with the Corfas and Slack. We need y'all to be as on top of working that as we are, to make sure that these people are actually getting plugged into cores. For people who fill out the online like Get Connected form, Sienna or I usually will either call or text them as fast as possible when they fill that form out, to try and get them, see what days they're interested in joining core. And usually we will be sending those people to y'all to make sure that that connection happens. We'll follow up with you. We'll make sure you actually texted them, that they responded, and make sure that connection's happening. That's not going to work for everybody, because not everybody responds to us. And so there's going to be in that form a list of people who it says never answered, and we do want y'all to just take the initiative and go and reach out to those people again. For a lot of people, it is a little bit intimidating for a pastor to reach out to them, and it's not nearly as intimidating for one of y'all to make that ask. So we already shared that form. That was a couple of days ago, so it's in Slack, but we will share it again and kind of give an update as we filled in things like core cards and the new Get Connected forms that come in for the next few days. And speaking of core cards, we've got a slightly different system for that. Sienna will explain.
Okay, y'all seen these? We know what these are.
Yes.
We're gonna have core cards at every event that we're doing, especially the tabling, the coffee tabling going on this week. We're gonna collect them at the end of the night. They're great. If you can get someone's number and invite them to core, and they can go to your core, you don't have to have them fill this out. Like, you are already their connection, just make sure you keep up with it. But if like they're maybe more on the fence, it's a great thing. Just like, you can just fill this out. Someone will contact you later. Or if you can't, like they can't do your core time, you can fill this out. If they happen to fill out a core card and you already are the one texting them, they can go to your core, put your name at the top so I can add that to the notes that like they're already connected to your core, so we aren't spamming people asking them to go to 5 different cores. But yeah, this is gonna be really helpful to get people to fill these out if like you can't make that connection, just so we can put that in. Now, when we put those in, and we'll send a text of like, hey, it's updated. As people, especially if you had trouble meeting people or you're coming late to the party, go right away, like that instant. Go and put that you're gonna reach out to them and then actually reach out to them. It's a really great way. I'm like, these people are at least somewhat interested in focus. And so we really want you to be able to connect with them. But it is first come, first serve. So if you're like, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow, it will be gone. At least the women's side. The women have been great. The men, I'm like, no, I'm reaching out to everyone yet. What's happening? So make sure we do that, because the sooner you can, we're trying to put these in like every day. The sooner you can do it, the more likely they're still interested.
Yeah.
And they actually like will remember what focus is.
And do please put what day you reached out to someone on, so that we know if you reached out, say, 5 days ago and this person hasn't responded, it's probably time for another person to reach out and do the ask again. We don't want to just let people who showed us that they're interested disappear because 1 or 2 times they didn't respond to a text. Not everyone is very good at texting. So make sure you just kind of keep up and be consistent with these people. And a great way to do that is to coordinate, communicate, put what day you've contacted someone.
Great. Rohit, did you have a question?
I kind of answered, but I was like, when do you put that no they haven't?
I honestly didn't really hear the question. I'm sorry.
If they're, for y'all, for the camera, when do we put no, they haven't responded? Probably like a day or 2.
I mean, honestly, a couple hours. I think
There we go.
at that point, someone's probably not responding to a text if they've waited a few hours to look at it.
Yeah, maybe by the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like check and see, like just have it in your schedule just to check like who hasn't responded, fill that form out, make sure to update it. But we really do that form for y'all to make it as easy as possible to meet people. So use it, please do. It's gonna be really helpful.
Cool. And then Brandon, I know there's a prayer activity. Are you giving instructions for that?
Yeah, we're gonna wrap. Just get with a partner, be your same partner from earlier. Just pray for each other this week, and then if you're ready, do you want to give the instructions?
Sure, yeah. There are